All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling psychic readings.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, we've got excerpts from this article, and it really digs into the whole science versus superstition debate.
I mean, can you really prove any of this stuff?
Right. But then you hear about things like Project Stargate. Did you know even the U.S. government was investigating psychic abilities?
Really?
Like, seriously? Seriously. It makes you wonder, what if there's something more to all of this? But before we go full X-Files, let's maybe just define what we mean by psychic reading, because it's not all just fortune tellers and crystal balls, right?
Yeah, there are so many different types.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, you've got clairvoyance, which is kind of like having a sixth sense,
Yeah.
like seeing things beyond the normal five senses.
I can barely handle the 5 I've got.
Right. And then there's telepathy, where it's like minds are communicating directly.
That's the one that always gets me.
And of course, precognition, the whole seeing the future thing.
Like Minority Report style.
Exactly. Oh, and we can't forget mediumship, where people say they can talk to spirits.
So all pretty out there, right? But then there's intuition. We've all felt that, like a gut feeling that sometimes turns out to be right.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, science is really starting to recognize intuition as a real cognitive process.
So it's not just some mystical woo-woo stuff.
Nope. There's actually this test, the Wisconsin card sorting test, and they found that people could recognize patterns in the cards before they could consciously explain what the pattern was.
Wow, that's wild. So it's like our brains are picking up on stuff way before we even realize it.
Exactly.
Could that be what psychics are doing, but just on a much bigger scale?
That's one theory. There's also this researcher, Dr. Gerd Gigerenzer, and he found that sometimes when you have a lot of information, relying on gut feelings can lead to better decisions than overthinking things.
Really? So trusting your gut can actually be a good thing.
Sometimes, yeah. It's like your brain processing all this info without you even realizing it.
I read about a study, it was at the University of South Wales. The participants could predict these random events, like whether a light would flash red or blue with amazing accuracy, and they weren't even consciously aware of how they were doing it.
That's amazing. So what if some people, like psychics, are just super sensitive to those subconscious signals?
Maybe that's how they do those mind-blowing readings. It's like they're picking up on these cues that most of us miss.
It's possible. And it kind of connects to this whole sensory processing sensitivity thing.
Oh, yeah. That's the one where some people are just like more sensitive to everything, right?
Exactly. Sights, sounds, even emotions. Dr. Elaine Aron's done a lot of work on this. And these highly sensitive people, a lot of them are also super intuitive.
So maybe those two things are linked. Like the more sensitive you are, the more you pick up on those subtle cues.
Interesting. And then there's cross-modal perception, which is pretty wild. Some people can hear colors or feel sounds.
Wait, what?
It's a real thing. It shows how our senses can get all mixed up in ways we don't fully understand. Maybe some psychics are experiencing something similar, like they're picking up on sensory information that most of us just aren't wired for.
Okay, I'm trying to keep an open mind here, but is it all just superstition? Like maybe there's a more down-to-earth explanation for all of this?
Well, it depends what you mean by superstition,
Yeah.
right? It's one thing to think psychics have supernatural powers. That's maybe getting into superstitious territory. But exploring these phenomena with science, that's different.
So don't just dismiss it, test it, see if there's something real there.
Exactly. There's a whole field called parapsychology that studies these things scientifically. It's still pretty controversial, but some of their findings are, well, they're pretty interesting.
Get this. I was reading that some scientists think there might be connections between psychic phenomena and quantum mechanics. That's next-level mind-bending stuff.
I know. It's wild. Dr. Roger Penrose, he's this physicist, and he's even suggested that consciousness might work on a quantum level. Maybe that's how you get those weird connections between minds, or even between a mind and something that hasn't happened yet, precognition.
Oh, so maybe what we call psychic is just our brains tapping into something science hasn't figured out yet.
It's a possibility. I mean, even mainstream science is starting to admit that, okay, yeah, heightened perception and intuition, those are real things. We can measure them.
Which is pretty amazing in itself. Makes you wonder what else we might discover about ourselves. But I do have a question. What about the whole black magic thing? A lot of people link those two together, psychic readings and black magic.
Right, but you got to separate those two things. Psychic readings, they're usually about connection and insight. Helping someone understand themselves better. It's not about casting spells or anything like that.
So it's more about self-discovery than trying to control other people.
Exactly. Black magic, that's a whole different thing. And it's about power and control. trying to manipulate things to harm others.
So the connection people make, that's more of a cultural thing, right? Some cultures are just more suspicious of anything psychic.
It's all about context and intention. But, we often forget to talk about the brain. Dr. Dean Radin, he's a neuroscientist, and he actually suggests that our brains might be able to pick up on things that science can't explain yet.
So, there's more going on in our heads than we even realize.
Maybe. For example, the amygdala, the part of the brain that handles emotions. Well, it seems to be more active in people who are really intuitive.
Interesting.
And the limbic system that controls our emotions and how sensitive we are to our surroundings, well, could be that psychics just have a more finely tuned limbic system.
So they're just picking up on all those subtle cues, like facial expressions and body language, that most of us miss. It's like they have a sixth sense for emotions.
Exactly. It's fascinating, right? And it brings up the question, is there actual, scientific proof for any of this?
I mean, it seems like it's been hard to find so far.
It has. But there are some pretty compelling case studies and stories that we shouldn't just ignore. Have you heard of the Ganzfeld experiment?
Oh, yeah, that's the one where they tried to test telepathy.
Exactly. People tried to send and receive images using only their minds. The results were statistically significant, which means it probably wasn't just chance, but, well, not everyone agrees about what it means.
Yeah, I can see how that would be hard to prove definitively. And then there was Project Stargate, which we talked about earlier. I mean, the U.S. government actually looked into remote viewing, where people could supposedly see distant places with their minds.
I know, right? The results were mixed, but some people were incredibly accurate.
It's mind-blowing, even if we can't fully explain it with science yet. So if there might be something to all of this, why do you think so many people seek out psychic readings?
That's a great question. It seems like people want more than just to know the future or talk to spirits.
Yeah, I think it's about wanting clarity on their lives, understanding their relationships better, or even just feeling connected to something bigger than themselves.
I think you're right. It's like they're looking for a different perspective, a way to make sense of things. In a way, it's kind of like therapy or counseling.
That's a good point. It's like seeking out a wise friend or mentor who can offer insights that you might not see yourself. And sometimes, just believing in something, even if it can't be scientifically proven, can have a big impact on your life.
It's true. There's the placebo effect,
Yeah.
where even if something isn't real in the traditional sense, the belief in it can cause real changes in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Like our minds are that powerful, they can create their own reality.
It seems like it. It really makes you question what's real and what's just our perception.
So maybe it's not about proving or disproving psychic abilities, but more about understanding how our minds and beliefs shape our experiences.
That's a really insightful way to look at it. I think it's important to see how these readings fit into the bigger picture of what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And, in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, that search for meaning and connection is more important than ever.
I agree. But as we keep exploring this topic, there's one thing we can't forget, and that's the potential downsides.
You mean like the ethical considerations, especially with all this technology popping up?
Exactly. We talked about algorithms being used to predict our behavior and make choices for us. Well, what happens when those algorithms get so good that they're like psychic readings?
You mean like they can know us better than we know ourselves? That's a bit creepy.
It is. And it's not just about knowing us. It's about potentially influencing us, manipulating us, without us even realizing it.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be concerned about. It's like a double-edged sword. This technology could be used for amazing things like personalized medicine or education.
Right, but what if it's used to control us, to exploit us?
It's like a sci-fi dystopia come to life.
It is a bit, isn't it? And it's not some external force like a psychic reading. It's our own data, our digital footprints, being used to predict and manipulate our behavior.
That's a scary thought. I mean, we need to be having these conversations now before it's too late.
Absolutely. We need to figure out who controls this data, how it's being used, and what protections we have.
It's not just about psychic readings anymore. It's about the future of our privacy, our autonomy, our free will.
You're right. It's a big issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to think about. And it's interesting how these ethical dilemmas connect back to what we were saying about psychic readings.
Oh, yeah, good point. Because even though psychic readings are often seen as this mystical thing, there are ethical questions there too. Like, what responsibilities do psychics have to their clients?
Exactly. How do we know the information they're giving is accurate And what about the potential for someone to be taken advantage of?
It's a lot to consider. I guess it all comes back to balance, right? We need to find a way to use technology for good without sacrificing our values or freedoms.
I think you're right. We need to be open to the possibilities, but also skeptical. We need to keep asking questions, keep pushing for transparency and accountability.
Absolutely. And, maybe that's one of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive into psychic readings. It's not just about believing or disbelieving. It's about recognizing that these phenomena tap into something fundamental about being human.
That desire for connection, meaning, and guidance.
Exactly. And as we move deeper into this new century where the lines between science and spirituality, technology and intuition get blurrier and blurrier, it's more important than ever to stay curious, engaged, and aware of what's happening around us.
So true.
This has been an incredible conversation so far. We've gone from the science of intuition to the potential impact of technology on how we seek meaning and guidance. But there's one last piece of the puzzle I want to explore, and that's the ethical side of all this.
That's important. As the lines between science and spirituality, technology, and intuition continue to blur, it's crucial to consider the ethics of what we're doing.
I'm really looking forward to unpacking that. But for now, we'll leave you with this thought. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our curiosity about the world.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. You never know what amazing discoveries are waiting for us.
So we're back, diving deeper into the world of psychic readings. Last time we were talking about some of those mind-blowing studies like the Ganzfeld experiment and Project Stargate. They really make you question what we know about the brain and its capabilities.
Absolutely. Those studies really push the boundaries of what traditional science can explain. Like with the Ganzfeld experiment, trying to measure telepathic communication. Well, they got some statistically significant results, but there's still so much debate.
Yeah, trying to capture something like telepathy in a scientific experiment, I can see how that's a challenge. And then you have Project Stargate, where the government was literally trying to train psychic spies.
Right.
It's wild.
It shows how seriously some people have taken these abilities. I mean, think about it. Even the intelligence community was intrigued. Sure, Project Stargate was eventually shut down, but it's pretty telling that it existed at all.
I know, right? And some of those remote viewers they were studying, they supposedly gave some incredibly accurate information. It really makes you think, what if we've only scratched the surface of what human consciousness can do?
It's a fascinating question. But even if we set aside those more, let's say, controversial studies, there's no denying that a lot of people turn to psychic readings for guidance and support.
That's true. And it's not always about wanting to know the future or connect with loved ones who've passed away. I think a lot of people just want clarity on their current situation.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding their relationships better, making sense of their careers, or just feeling a sense of connection to something bigger than themselves.
That's a good point. It's like searching for a different perspective, a way to navigate the ups and downs of life, almost like, therapy or counseling.
Exactly. It's like seeking out a wise friend or mentor. Someone who can see things you might not see yourself. And sometimes, even if it can't be scientifically proven, just believing in something can make a difference in your life.
That's the power of belief, right?
It is. Think about the placebo effect. It shows how our minds are so powerful that they can create their own reality.
It's like even if something isn't real in the traditional sense, if you believe it, your mind can make it real.
Exactly. It really challenges our ideas of what's real and what's not. So maybe it's not so much about proving or disproving psychic abilities.
Maybe it's more about understanding how those beliefs and perceptions influence our lives.
I think you've hit on something there. It's about understanding how these readings fit into the bigger picture of human experience. We have this need for meaning, connection, and a sense of agency, especially in a world that often feels chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where psychic readings come in for a lot of people. They offer that comfort and sense of direction. But as we dive deeper into this, I think it's also important to acknowledge the potential downsides.
You mean the ethical side of things?
Exactly. We're already seeing how technology is being used to predict our behavior and influence our choices. I mean, think about those personalized ads that seem to know exactly what you're thinking.
It's incredible and a little unsettling. What happens when those algorithms get even more sophisticated? What if they become like psychic readings?
You're saying that they could potentially know us better than we know ourselves?
It's a real possibility. Imagine a world where algorithms can predict your desires, your career path, your relationships, all with incredible accuracy.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie. And it's not just about knowing us, it's about the potential for manipulation.
Absolutely. What if these algorithms are used to exploit us, to shape our perceptions and behaviors without us even realizing it? That's where the ethical questions come in.
It feels like a slippery slope. I mean, on the one hand, you have the potential for amazing advancements.
Like in healthcare, personalized medicine, education. But yeah, on the other hand, there's the risk of misuse.
What about privacy? Discrimination? What happens when we lose control over our own data and how it's being used?
These are big questions, and they're not easy to answer. But they're conversations we need to be having now. And it's interesting how these ethical concerns link back to what we were discussing about psychic readings.
Oh yeah, you're right. Because even though psychic readings are often seen as this mystical thing, they raise ethical questions too, like what's the psychic's responsibility to their client?
Exactly. How do we ensure the information they're giving is accurate and not harmful? How do we protect people from being taken advantage of? It all comes back to this idea of balance, finding a middle ground.
I agree. We need to be open to exploring the possibilities, but also skeptical. We need to be aware of the potential downsides, the ethical implications.
Right. It's about finding that balance between blind faith and outright rejection.
And maybe that's one of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive into psychic readings. It's not about simply believing or disbelieving.
It's about understanding that this desire for connection, for meaning, for guidance, it's part of what makes us human.
Exactly. And as we move deeper into this century, where the lines between science and spirituality, technology and intuition become even more blurred, I think that understanding is going to be more important than ever.
I agree. And as we move forward, it's crucial to stay curious, to keep questioning, to stay engaged with these conversations.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. I'm really glad we're having this discussion. We've covered so much ground, from the science of intuition to the ethical implications of technology. But there's one final piece of the puzzle that I want to explore, and that's how ethics play into all of this.
That's a great point, and that's exactly what we'll be delving into in the final part of our deep dive. As the lines between science and spirituality, technology and intuition continue to blur, it becomes even more important to think about the ethics of what we're doing.
I can't wait to unpack all of that. But for now, we'll leave you with this thought. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our ongoing curiosity about the world.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and always keep an open mind. Who knows what incredible discoveries are waiting for us just around the corner.
Okay, so we're back, and it feels like we've really gone deep into this world of psychic readings. We've talked about the science, the personal experiences, the skepticism, but now we're at this point where psychic phenomena and technology are kind of colliding.
Yeah, it's almost like science fiction is becoming reality right before our eyes.
Exactly. We were just talking about how algorithms can predict our behavior and make decisions about our lives. It's kind of wild to think that our online activity could basically create a psychic reading of us.
It's fascinating and a little bit unnerving at the same time. Imagine a world where algorithms know our desires, our career paths, even our relationships better than we do.
It's like those ads that pop up and you're like, wait, how did they know I was just thinking about that? But it's not just about selling us stuff anymore. It's about influencing our thoughts and choices.
And that's where the ethical concerns become really important. Because if we're not careful, we could be manipulated and exploited by these technologies in ways we can't even imagine yet.
It's like a slippery slope, right? On the one hand, you have the potential for amazing advancements like personalized medicine and education. But on the other hand,
there's the potential for misuse, discrimination, even a loss of privacy and control over our own lives.
So we really need to start having these conversations now before it's too late.
I agree. We need to figure out who controls this data, how it's being used, what protections we have.
It's not just about psychic readings anymore. It's about the future of privacy, autonomy, even free will. And it's interesting how these ethical questions connect back to what we were talking about earlier.
You mean the ethics of psychic readings themselves?
Yeah, exactly. Because even though psychic readings are often seen as this mystical thing, there are ethical considerations there too. What responsibility does a psychic reader have to their client?
Right. How do you make sure the information they're giving is accurate and unbiased? How do you prevent people from being taken advantage of?
It's a lot to think about. I guess it comes back to this idea of balance, finding a middle ground between blindly accepting everything and rejecting everything outright.
It's about being open to the possibilities, but also being skeptical.
And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from our deep dive into psychic readings. It's not about simply believing or disbelieving. It's about recognizing that this desire for connection, meaning, guidance, it's a fundamental part of being human.
Absolutely. And as we move further into this century, where the lines between science and spirituality, technology and intuition continue to blur, that understanding is going to become even more important.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of psychic readings, we want to leave you with this thought. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together through our choices, our actions, and our curiosity about the world around us.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us just around the corner?